Today my topic is really the 5 skills of an innovator. So I think almost by a lot, I'm the oldest person in the room. Very old, right? And so what I've done is I've actually taken some time to look back at all the different things that I've done and actually start to look at who are the innovators out there. So a little bit about me is I'm an engineer. I live in Detroit, I grew up in Detroit, and I've developed and launched over 3,500 different products. Everything from, I worked on the radar absorbing material for the stealth bomber, I worked on the guidance system for the Patriot missile, I worked on Pokemon mac and cheese, 5-gum, and Basecamp, and just about everything in between. So the crazy part is when I start to look back, I've worked with so many people. But the one thing that I would say is that I have a mantra that I've been using for pretty much the last 30 years, and it's really this notion of context creates value and contrast creates meaning. And it really kind of rings true when I start to look at the skills that the innovators I've worked with and what they do. So I've worked with everybody from Jason and Clay and Dr. Taguchi and Luke and Dr. Deming, like just a whole range of people. And so I kind of took a step back and said, what do these people do from a skill perspective that's really kind of like people haven't really observed or talked about? And I came back with these 5 skills. So skill number 1 is what I call empathetic perspective. They can actually see things from so many different perspectives. So to me, what I'm hoping you get from this conversation is like, here's some of the skills as to be a good product manager, is that these are skills that I know that are very successful people use. And like the first one here is empathetic perspective, and I'll go through an example and define it a little bit more, but this is they can see things, right? The other thing is they have what I call causal structures. Again, the words are hard for me right now, so that's the best I could come up with. It's not systems. Everybody has their own mental model, but they have a cause and effect structure of how stuff works. A third thing is they have a really good eye for uncovering demand. Not creating demand, uncovering demand. And I'll articulate the differences of that. The fourth one is really about, this is one of my pet peeves, which is I think a lot of people prototype to confirm, but the really good innovators, they prototype to learn. And they're literally pushing the limits, and they're okay to fail on their prototypes, and they're very efficient about how they prototype. And so I'll talk through that. And the last one, there we go, is they know how to make trade-offs. They literally are experts at framing. Instead of optimizing, they're literally saying, like, this is more important than that. They have a way of being able to understand the viability, desirability, and feasibility, and saying, like, for this to be a viable thing and a feasible thing and desirable thing, here's the trade-off set we have to make. And so they have their own mechanism for it. So how many people were here this morning for Jason's talk? Most of you? Okay. So I actually want to talk through, I actually kind of accompanied Ryan on his journey of writing a book called Shape Up. Right? And so the best part of this is that, like, my favorite is in October, I think it was like mid to late October, Jason goes to Ryan and says, I want you to write a book. If you know anything about Ryan, Ryan is the head of product. He's been there for 16 years. He's the one who basically takes what Jason and David and Ryan talk about and translates it down to the teams, right? And so the first thing is Jason saying that is kind of like, Ryan's like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, Jason's written Get Real, Remote, Rework, and it doesn't have to be crazy at work. He just launched it, and Jason's like, yeah, Ryan, you should write a book. What do you think Ryan's response was? Holy shit. I don't know how to write a book. I know how to make product, but I don't know how to make a book. So the first thing he does is he sits down at his computer and he realizes, I don't even know what to type. I don't know where to start, right? So the first thing he does is he's like, so we talk about it a little bit, and he goes, you know what? I should run a class. I'm like, good idea. So if he can teach it, then he can figure out what to write about. So he tweets on, what is the date there? Where is it? November 28th. So he finally says, you know what? I'm going to put together a class. That's December 20th. So it's less than 3 weeks away. And he literally pops up a website and says, oh, come to this workshop. he doesn't even know what to call it. So he calls it shape and ship or something like that? He charges $1,000 for it, and he has no idea what he's going to cover. Right? He gets, oh, by the way, when he does this, he goes, I need to pick like who's going to come because there'll be fans and there'll be people who want to, all this thing. So he builds a long form application to apply to come to the workshop, right? And then he'll say, you've been invited to come to this workshop. He literally had over 100 people sign up. He only picked 25. And it was their essay answers that let him get into the workshop. So then he's like, holy crap, I gotta do a course. And so he sits down and he writes all this different material, like I can talk about this, I can talk about that. I remember walking in like the day of and he's like, I think I only have a half a day of material. I don't know what I'm gonna do. All right, I'm like, it'll be fine. He runs the workshop. He literally only gets through half the material, right? So he does this workshop and it's good, it's okay. But the main reason why he did it was so he could actually go and interview people. Why in the world would you pay $1,000 in the middle of December to come to Chicago to learn about something that is so vague as shape and ship, right? Well, after doing the interviews, he realized there were 4 jobs. Job number 1, help me shift responsibility to the team so I can think. They're literally coming back to me all the time, and I literally don't have time to think about what's next. I need them to do the work, but I don't need to tell them everything they need to do. Job number 2, help me make faster progress. I feel like we make 3 steps forward, we take 4 steps back. We take 3 steps forward, we take 4 steps back. Like, help us be more productive. I don't feel like we're being productive in how we actually develop product. Job number 4, help me bring my team along. It's help me teach my team new methods and tools of how they can be actually more efficient. And the last one is, help me put my ideas in a form that enable other people to act on them. It was one of those things where one of the people who was there was really about this fact of, like, I can't articulate what I want in a way that people just don't do what I tell them. So my favorite example is where it's that I'm going to wireframe it and say, like, this is kind of what I'm thinking about, and all you got back was exactly what the wireframe was, right? And so it's like, how do we get past that? So with that in mind, he literally sets off and goes like, all right, these are the situations I'm trying to write this book for. So he goes off. I don't expect anybody to read that, but he starts to build a system. Here's the things, here's the sequence, here's the different content we had, here's the sequence by which it happened. So he talked about the first big system is shaping, the second system is betting, and the last part is building. And then he talks about each thing as a chapter, as like, here's the inputs to the chapter, here's the actual actions that they have to do in that chapter to get to this output. So he has a way in which to think about each chapter as a system and how they connect, right? Then he goes up. So this is now, so January is when he did the interviews. I think we did this right near the end of the month of January. And so then he goes off and he starts to just fill it in. So he doesn't go into any one sequence. He just starts to say, like, what content do I have? And he starts slotting in and to find out what's missing, right? And so he starts doing both graphics and text, and he does everything on his iPad. So he gets to a point where he feels okay about it. He knows it's not perfect, right? But he comes back and he publishes this book called Shape Up. He does it in a way that he actually puts the entire book online on web pages. So he can edit quickly, add different things to it, and actually see what people are reading, right? So he doesn't actually make it an easy PDF download. He actually makes it really hard to consume, very hard to consume. Anybody read it or read it when it was online? It was like, holy crap, it was just like, oh, please, can we just, there were people printing pages and making books, and like, it was kind of crazy. But this is how he prototyped it, right? Then he also asked 3 people he knows to say, like, can you try to have this, and I'd like you to talk to your teams about it and prototype at your companies. So we asked Chris Speck, who's one of the co-founders of the REWIRED group. He's now at auto books. Ilya's staring at a company called, hold on, I can't remember it. He'll kill me, but that's okay. This is on video. Sorry, Ilya. And then Andy Weisbecker, who's at Target. And so they went and literally, from May until about July, they literally tried to apply it. So they took it to their teams, they talked to their teams about it, and we just sat back and listened to what the language was, what there were problems with, and all of a sudden they started to realize there was some gap in some language, so he changed a lot of the wording in a couple of the chapters to actually fit what that happened. And then in January, like July 20th, we actually announced this second workshop. We had 1 month to actually pull it off. And it was this is for Ryan to make the trade-off so he can actually teach this in 1 day, teach all of ShapeUp in 1 day. Because part of this is how does he decide what not to put in the book? Because there's just so much stuff. So we go out, we put it out for almost 30 days. We get 30 people in 30 days at $2,500 a pop, right? So here's the thing is, we're actually funding development by having customers pay for something that they want, right? So after that, he then actually puts it as a PDF download to say, like, is this worthy to be a print book or not, right? So how did he do? He actually had 345,000 unique visitors in 90 days. And from the moment he actually made the PDF download, he had more than 10,000 downloads in the last 30 days. And so from his perspective, it's like, yep, this is big enough. Yep, I should actually go figure out kind of how to print the book. I'm going to make some final edits to it and publish. So here's the thing. My talk is really not necessarily about Ryan, but the skills that he had to go from, I know nothing about writing a book, I know nothing about this feature, I know nothing about this product, to literally being able to launch something and use these skills to do it. And so my thing is as an innovator, for me, the ability to actually span all these different industries comes from the fact that I know these skills very, very well, right? So here's the crazy part, right? So first of all, Ryan is very good at empathetic perspective. He gives like, here's what's Jason gonna say? What's David gonna say? What's the customer gonna say? Who's gonna read the book? You know, does this really reflect reality? He's like, he can see things from many different perspectives. But the big thing is he's like, who, when, where, and why is somebody gonna actually pick up the book? So he can frame demand, right? And then he basically goes over and say, well, what, how, and how much do I have to write about it to actually fulfill the demand? So he goes out and builds systems to do it. And then he prototypes. He prototypes in December. He prototypes online. He literally gets to read what people are looking at, and then he actually does another workshop to actually prove out what he can do, right? And out of that, then he makes trade-offs to actually help him figure out what not to do or what to pull out. So these 5 skills are really things that again, what I'm saying as a 54-year-old, if I could actually tell myself when I was 20 what to work on, these are the skills that have enabled me, to be honest, I feel like I could change the world. And so I want to go through them a little bit more. This notion of empathetic perspective, how do I say? I spend a lot of time choosing words. Though I'm dyslexic, the reality is I speak it and I wrestle with words all the time. But this is a thing where this is what I feel like when I get involved in a new project. There's so many different places, there's so many different problems. And I feel blind to the entire situation, that no matter what data set I look at, I don't feel like I see the whole thing. And so this notion of empathetic perspective enables me and others to literally see things from different people's perspective, but not from a judgmental perspective. What would they say? What would they feel? Why would they see that? What do they see that I don't see, right? I feel like it's this notion of literally seeing things from, I always go like this, all these different perspectives, so you actually get a great handle on the problem. I feel like a lot of innovations fail because they only see it from 1 or 2 perspectives. And so being able to see it from so many perspectives helps you be more successful, right? The bigger thing to me is there's 2 very specific things that innovators do here. One is, and if you think about the most innovative person you worked with, you'll see this. They go from the macro view to the micro view in 3 seconds. They literally go from talking about, well, it needs to be this, and then boom, there's like, well, we should write the code to do that. And you're like, whoa, dude, where are you going? Like, I can't even keep up with that. The other thing that they do is they think through time. They literally can see things as they go through time. So I built homes, and my favorite, oh, dude, you are a lifesaver. I was hoping to get that before I got on, but sure, I'll take that, thank you. I get my early beer. They think, so I worked with a guy named Anthony Lombardo, and Anthony literally could look at blueprints, and he could literally raise the house from the page. He could watch the contractors build the house, and he could see the sequence by which stuff came in, and he could literally go like, we need to move that wall, we need to actually put plugs over here, it was just an amazing aspect to be able to say how they could think through time and space and understand from all these different perspectives. And so to me, practice looking at from as many perspectives as you can. Skill number 2, causal structures. I used to have this as systems thinking. The problem is everybody thinks they know systems thinking, and so there's all these different definitions of it. But the interesting part about this is that the people who are really good innovators have a cause and effect mentality, and so that's why I called it causal structure. My mentor when I was 19 was this gentleman here, he's Dr. Deming, and he basically said, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, then you don't know what you're doing. Okay? Again, he was hard of hearing. I was 19 years old. I felt like he was screaming at me, so I know that one by heart. Right? But the reality is that at some point in time, good innovators or strong innovators have more than just see events and patterns and underlying structures. They have a mental model. I don't think there's a right model, but it's more a set of models to help them make sense of how shit works. And they're curious, right? Like, this is what I feel like this is it. This is me, which is I'm not clever or gifted, but the fact is I'm just curious. How does that work? Why does it happen? How does electromagnetism, I have a degree in electrical engineering because I just like, how in the world do magnets work? That was literally my obsession. Had no idea what I was going to do with it, but it was just curious. So to me, having good mental models, having many mental models, having conflicting mental models, think of it this way. We don't know, I think, 1/10 of how the world works. We still think light is a wave and a particle simultaneously. We don't have a way to describe light effectively. So sometimes you need 2 or 3 mental models to help you articulate how something works. Don't be afraid of that, right? Skill number 3 is uncovering demand. This is what Jobs to be Done is about, but it's the aspect of they understand that this isn't about selling product. This is about helping people make progress in their life. And progress comes from struggling moments. If you don't know where your customer's struggling, then it's really hard to innovate because at some point in time, if they don't struggle, they actually aren't even looking for a new product. And so really good innovators here have a good understanding of the difference between what I call supply-side thinking and demand-side thinking. Right? Supply-side thinking is this, right? I have a business system. Hold on, I gotta take a drink. Oh, that was good. The business system basically produces a product. That product has features and benefits, and those features and benefits literally also have attributes and experiences. And I have sales and marketing kind of help me with those things. But the reality is, like, I look at the consumer as this blob. Who's the ideal customer? What's the ideal user experience? But that's actually not how, and we say like, who wants our product, right? And I always call this like, I have a product, what job can my product do? That's what I call supply-side thinking. The reality is, I can build the best product in the world, but if there's actually no demand for it, it ain't gonna happen. And demand happens very differently. Demand happens like this, there's a consumer, and if they're happy with what they're doing, they literally cannot see your product. Think about walking down the aisle, and you know what you're gonna have for dinner on Tuesday night, and you're like, yep, just gonna grab that. Yep, I'm gonna grab that. We're habit people. The only time we actually pick something new is when we struggle. And the moment we struggle, we go, oh, what else could I do? But that struggling moment is actually caused by 2 things. The current product and a certain specific context that I'm in that says, this doesn't work anymore, or we can do better, or this isn't good enough, right? And the moment then you struggle, you actually start to actually cause another thing, which is, I have some new desired outcomes. Boy, if I'm gonna switch, I might as well add this and this and this, which then has you lead to candidates and hire and fire criteria. And so out of this, you actually realize that the struggling moment is the only place where to aim innovations. The consumer actually has to innovate as much as the company has to innovate. And I believe that at some point in time, helping consumers be better consumers helps us all. And so innovators actually, real good innovators, actually understand the difference between pushing a product and pulling a product being pulled into the market. And it's through this notion of struggling moments. This is where I say context creates value. Number 4, this is a 4-hour course in itself. Dr. Taguchi, who is my mentor on this, I don't even know how to explain him, but he basically taught me how to think about prototyping in such a different way that I could actually build, for example, 8 prototypes that would be the equivalent of 128 prototypes through math that enabled me to be 10 times more efficient. And so, but innovators think about how to prototype fast. So think of Ryan. Ryan's first prototype was scary. He literally built the workshop and see how many people he could get before he even had materials. He then built materials and he knew wasn't perfect. He literally stood up in front of 30 or 25 people and literally talked about something that he knew wasn't perfect. But for them, it was better than nothing. And so understanding how to prototype and how to be practical about prototyping is really, really important, right? And most innovators have their own process for building prototypes. But what I will tell you is I don't feel too many people study how other people prototype. The thing I was going to tell you is Dr. Taguchi, who is passed, his biggest pet peeve was A/B testing. We called it one factor at a time testing. And he would say that it was the most ineffective way in which to test anything. And to be honest, he would get so mad if anybody, for me as a newbie, would propose it. And he'd show me how to do a set of 8, and I could actually understand what caused what. And by just doing a little bit more homework, I'd actually be way better than any A/B testing ever. But most people are so happy with A/B testing that they just don't worry about it and they keep doing it. But the moment that you have to take something out, it's like your whole house of cards crumbles and you start over. Because you don't know why anything's A is better than B or B is better than A, unless you actually plan it out, right? So the reality is that they also use prototypes to do what we call convergent thinking and divergent thinking, right? The notion of divergent thinking is, what are the possibilities? I feel that most people prototype only to confirm what they already know, like pre-hypotheses. But what I find is really, really innovative people, they actually innovate to the edges of possibility. And they find out how to do it either faster or cheaper or better, right? In some way. And the reality is, like, most people, when they're A/B testing, they're not really pushing limits. I feel like they're just tweaking, right? And this is where I say contrast creates meaning. In most cases, consumers actually need contrast to understand. And prototypes are the only way to do it. And half the time, we're bringing prototypes that are this far apart. And we don't understand why they can't tell the difference, and we're actually trying to get them to tell us differences between the thing. They actually sometimes need prototypes this far apart. And so part of this is, how do we actually understand what's meaningful to consumers, and how do we prototype that way? And the last one, making trade-offs. I think the thing that kills most really good innovations is when they don't have this skill, because they're trying to make it perfect on every dimension. And typically, they don't give enough time, they don't actually give enough money, they don't actually have enough performance, and they don't have enough knowledge. And so literally, they're trying to put 10 pounds of shit into a 5-pound bag. And so they end up just extending, to Jason's point this morning, they just keep extending over and over and over again. And the reality is that this is about making trade-offs, knowing what's important, knowing what's not important. The way I like to say is, choosing what to suck at is sometimes an easy way to do it. My example here is how many people fly Southwest? how much do you like their snacks? Would you say they're 10? No, not really. And guess what? You can complain all you want about snacks. They don't give a shit. They don't care. The reality is at some point, you're not going to not fly Southwest because of their snacks. They're on time, they're the lowest cost, and oh, by the way, they don't actually really compete with Delta and all the other airlines. They compete with not going or driving, right? And so the snacks aren't that important, so they don't really care and don't pay attention to those things. Knowing what to suck at is as important to knowing what's important, what things to be good at, which is low-cost fares, on-time departures, right? And look, people complain about the seats, but they still don't not fly it because of the seats and knowing the seat number. So the reality is that people who are really good at making these trade-offs is they actually have what I call horizontal knowledge. We have these vertical knowledges in the company, but a really good innovator can actually understand the consumer and desirability. They can understand feasibility from a technological perspective, and they also can understand viability, right, from a business model perspective. And so lots of times it's like, at least when I was taught, it would be this notion of like, you know what? We'll just launch it now, we'll fix it later. We'll make it better, just get it out there. And the reality is this is mostly the time when you actually don't have somebody who knows how to make the trade-offs, because the trade-offs aren't formed. So Jason says it best, a kick-ass half is better than a half-ass whole, right? The reality is like you have to know when it's good enough, and oh, by the way, they won't care about these other things. Something that's so feature-loaded and it doesn't do it well will never be a good product. And that's how you know you've actually mastered kind of this skill. So in closing, it's like these things. Empathetic perspective is basically how to see the world, seeing it from many different perspectives. The second one is basically structure. This is how things work. Like, it's really being curious about how things work. Uncovering demand is really about how people work. It's psychology, right? Prototyping, it's how to learn. How do you learn? What do you need to hear? What questions are you trying to answer? Lots of times we're just actually trying to prove things. And so my thing is use prototypes to figure out how to learn and figure out the variables you need to change to do that. The last thing is making trade-offs. Here's the crazy part. Does this work? Yeah. Where do I learn empathetic perspective? How do I go learn that? I got 2 minutes. I know I'm holding you up, but then just bear with me. Typically, you're learning empathetic perspective in the arts, theater, taking a role, art, perspective in drawing, all these different things. And what happens is like as an engineer, that's the last thing I wanted to learn. God, I don't want an art class. I can't freaking draw, right? But the reality is what I learned is it's a really important skill. Being on stage, look, I'm an engineer. Look, I'm up here for God's sakes. It took me 35 years to actually get up here. But the reality is like knowing how to play a role, knowing actually how to actually forget your judgment system and take on somebody else's. Really important. But I only learn it in the arts usually. Think of causal structures. I use that in systems thinking, manufacturing. These two worlds aren't actually taught together. Uncovering demand. Guess what? That's marketing. That's, in some cases, it's psychology. It's actually research, right? And so prototyping. Prototyping to me is math. Nobody likes math. Me, I do. But math is really important. And then the last one is making decisions and trade-offs. That's decision-making and management. To be an innovator, you actually have to have these horizontal skills. And so I challenge you to go back and pick a skill for 90 days and work on it. Figure out how to prototype better. Figure out how to understand it from different people's perspective. Take the time to figure out how to actually hear the struggling moments of your customers. Do you know how many engineers don't even know how to talk to a customer or listen for what a struggle is? So here's the thing. It's not only what they say, it's how they say it. 21 seconds. The reality is like, oh, that was really good, versus, boy, that was really good. The difference, at the first one, I went down, right? When you go down, it's like yeah, but it was good, but. When they go up, it's like, oh, it was really good. Well, what did you like about it? And so not only listen to what people say, but how they say it is equally as important. So it's like when I teach jobs to be done here in this uncovering demand, it's all about not only asking questions, but listening to how they say it and what they say. So my challenge to you in the next week, or to be honest, next idea, pick one of them and just go do homework on it. Research it. Buy a book or two on any one of those things. It'll make you a better product manager. Thank you.